This video is a quick demonstration of the outcomes tracker. Before I start the demonstration, I want to mention a couple of things. First, any data that you're about to see does not contain any protected health information. There's no PHI here. All of the participant information in this demo is completely fictional. Second, I want to mention the DLA-20 is a copyrighted functional assessment tool. I want to make it clear I am not affiliated with the creators of the DLA-20 in any way. The outcomes tracker is not the DLA-20 tool. Instead, it is a mechanism to store the DLA-20 assessments as data and then use that data to report outcomes at both a participant and an organization level. So let's get started. I'm actually going to start by showing you the data that goes in, and I'm going to pull up a participant, and for this demo I'm going to use Bugs Bunny. I pull up Bugs, I indicate who the assessor was for the DLA-20 assessment, I provide the assessment date, and then I provide the individual scores of each of the activities for the DLA. The scores are between 1 and 7, so I'm just going to randomly go through here and fill in a value between 1 and 7 on each of these. And then I'll put in a value that's outside the range. I put in 8 here, and you can see that this gives me a message that the DLA scoring should be between 1 and 7. So I'll correct that. And then I'll just finish by randomly filling these in. And then that's it. This is what the input looks like. This is the data for a DLA-20 assessment. I choose Save, and then once I've saved it, I can enter a new one by clicking New, or I can close this out. I can review the participant data once I've entered in the DLA-20s by going here. I'll click on that, and I'm going to pull up a different participant. I'm going to pull up Lime Green. And we can see that Lime has 6 assessments in the history. I can edit these DLA assessments just simply by double-clicking on one, and it pulls it up. And I could even make an edit here if I needed to. I can close this, and then I can look at the entire assessment history in Excel. And I'll click on Transfer DLA-20 History to Excel, and it creates a workbook, and this is what it looks like. At the top here we have the participant information, and then down below we have the assessment history. So each of these columns over here represents an assessment over time. Each individual DLA activity has its own row, so there's all 20 listed here. And then we have the true outcomes measured. This is comparing the baseline of where the participants started to where they are with their most recent assessment. And then there's a color-coded column that indicates whether there was improvement or a decline between those two scores. At the bottom, it shows the composite score for not only the baseline and the most recent, but also for each of the individual assessments. Over here in the assessments, you can see some pink and red color coding. The color coding just visually identifies whether or not a score has gone down from the previous assessment. So if you're reviewing this with a participant, it's easy to visually identify scores that have declined. With this being in Excel, it's easy to print this out and review it with a participant, or it can be saved as a PDF and attached to an EHR record. So in addition to being able to review the assessment history for an individual participant, we can look at the aggregate of those participants for the entire organization. I'm going to go down here to where it says Transfer DLA-20 Stats to Excel, and it creates an Excel workbook, and this is what that looks like. So again, we have the 20 DLA activities listed over here, and there's a row for each. And I'll just read across here. So for health practices, had 103 participants scored. The average baseline score was 3.9, and the average most recent score was 3.48. That's a change in those average scores of a minus 0.42. It converts that to a percentage over the possible change in the DLA scale. And then it gives you counts. It tells you how many participants had a decline in their score, how many had an improvement in their score, and how many where it was no change. And then it converts those same numbers just to a percentage of the population. In the DLA-20, scores of 5, 6, and 7 are considered to be within normal limits. And that's what the WNL stands for here, within normal limits. So Our count of individuals within normal limits at the baseline was 41, and then the count of individuals within normal limits on the most recent was 35. Again, it converts those two numbers to a percentage of the population. It shows you the difference in the raw score, and then it converts that to a percentage change as well. So this is a lot of numbers. So in addition to this tab here, there's a DLA Insights tab. And this tab, the first thing you see here is this graph where you visually can identify which of the DLA assessment activities has had the most movement. So for here, social network sticks up at 7.67%, and then over here, health practices at a minus 7%. That information is also put into a sentence right here. The activity with the highest improvements in the average assessment score was social network with a 7.7 increase. The activity with the lowest improvement in average assessment score with health practices with a minus 7% decrease. Down below here, we have a narrative builder. And as I choose the different DLA activities, the sentences underneath change. So I'll set it back to health practices, and you can see here there's a sentence that is built. 39.8% of participants had an improvement in their health practices assessment score. 48.5% of participants had a decline in their health practices assessment score. These sentences change as I change the DLA activity. The data for these sentences comes from this tab right here. This narrative builder serves two purposes. Number one, it helps provide understanding of what these numbers mean. And then secondly, if an individual is putting together an executive summary or making a presentation, these narratives help the individual come up with a consistent framework of language to use when describing these numbers. I want to point something out on this first tab here. These scores represent true participant-to-participant tracking, meaning for an individual participant to be reflected in these numbers, they need to have at least two assessments, one to establish a baseline score and one to establish a most recent score. So if an individual doesn't have at least two assessments, they are not reflected here. So on this first tab, there's another number here that says total active participants. You can see here that it says 113, but up above, we've only scored 103. That's telling me that there are 10 participants that don't have at least two assessments. Let's say that I'm an organization and I'm meeting with a health plan and I want to talk about the DLA 20 outcomes, but I only want to talk about those members that are for their health plan. I can go here to select DLA 20 stats by insurance/line of business, and I can choose the insurance company. So here I'm going to choose nearly complete health insurance. I can also choose a line of business if I want. So for this, I will choose Title 19, and then I'll export that to Excel. And we have the same workbook, except that now it's only for those participants that are enrolled with nearly complete health insurance under Title 19. I can see the same statistics, and I have the same insight builder that existed for the full organization. That's the end of the walkthrough here for the outcomes tracker. It's very simple, straightforward, easy to use.